Hi everyone, it's Diane with Real Progressives. I'm doing a little bit of a unique situation here. I am at the Green Party State Convention in South Amboy, New Jersey. I'm going to bring you some streaming of Justice Marshal Rountree. He's beginning an intro that he asked me not to live stream because some of the nature of his intro. So, as a social media live streamer, I'd like to respect the wishes of someone putting out a putting their pretty heartfelt, extreme story out. But we're going to get a lot of great info from Justice, and we'll see what else we can get out from him after. But he's a great social justice, criminal justice reform advocate. So there's some information in the description, and I would ask you guys to do your own research and info gathering about his story. Okay, so I'm waiting right now for him to give me the cue that I can come on in and live stream. So that's what's going on right now. And we'll be giving you his story in a second. Again, this is the Green Party State Convention in South Amboy, New Jersey. And as soon as he gives me the go-ahead, we'll be bringing the camera in. You know, with social media, our stories can go places we don't want them to go. So I'm trying to respect his privacy. Okay, we can go in now. Okay. Excuse the uniqueness of the stream.
Extremely generous, extremely kind. And I gave myself an opportunity, and I think the way in which I gave myself an opportunity is a story of struggle. And it's a microcosm of the larger picture. We should understand that we're living in a society that's deemed black people and poor people as expensive. And it's been like that. Every part of the criminal justice system falls most heavily on the poor and people of so-called color, including the fact that slavery is mandated and institutionalized in prisons by the 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution. And I'll quote it. It's 13th Amendment, Section 1. It says, "Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime." I repeat, except as a punishment for crime. "Whereof a party shall have been duly convicted shall exist within the United States or any other place subject to their jurisdiction." And Section 2, which follows up, it says, "Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation." So slavery, let's understand that, was never abolished by the 13th Amendment. And based on slavery, that was motivated by money, by capitalism. And that's why I appreciate the green community and those who think progressively, because it's an oppressive system that was established that oppresses us all. And that's why, my story of being inside prison, I was put in prison, sent to solitary confinement when I was inside prison, just for the way that I thought, just for having the audacity to being black and want to educate myself. Those were the reasons I was put in there. There's torture inside the New Jersey state prisons. And so we may look at other countries and everything and say we shouldn't do this, we shouldn't be torturous, but we're doing that right here in the New Jersey state prisons. And that's a part of my story that I can speak to firsthand. You have physical torture that some of you may be aware of, but there's also no-touch torture that inflicts pain and suffering in a systematic way. And it just attacks the human stimuli. So you have sleep deprivation, sensory disorientation, constant humiliation, having to go through strip searches just to go from here to the location where that bar is, you know, bend over, cough, spread your buttocks, and this type of constant, everyday, extra punishment. Because nobody denies that the purpose, there needs to be a necessity for people to be held accountable for their actions and separating people from society, you know, but the extra humiliation and the punishment, this goes back and spreads out to a larger picture. It's very common to subject these people to these type of conditions, and it's reflective of a larger mentality that's pervasive and built into the DNA of America.
That's right.
It's white supremacy, right? And that's not, you know, that's a term that we couldn't even bring to the table and discuss 15, 20 years ago. People weren't prepared to even mention that word without, you know, having or being exiled from the community, so to say. But now we understand that white supremacy is not good for any of us, you know, and it's not anybody in this room's burden, as far as, you know, nobody in here, not to be funny, but has enough power to actually, you know, individually enforce white supremacy. Like, we're all common people. We working, we fighting. You subject to it just like I am. You poor, for all intents and purposes. So this is a systematic institution that we all are fighting against. We all have the same common opposition. Nobody wants any of us to make any money or own anything or have any real power. And that, you know, I just, maybe my story or my perspective can be used to kind of understand the connection between the criminal justice system that we have, you know, how intentional it is. People often say, oh, you know, the justice system doesn't work. I think it works perfectly. It was intended to work in a way that destroyed people, that profited off of people. That was the inception. That was the history here, like capitalism, the profit off of free labor. All of us. You know, I was reading some interesting things, you know, leading up to tonight, and not just leading up to tonight, but also right beforehand. I just like to read. That's how I was, you know, personally, that's how I was able to transform myself to some 19-year-old knucklehead, and I, you know, educated myself and read and studied and became conscious and became aware and of myself, about my society, about, you know, everything, you know, and that empowered me to actually, you know, have a life of servitude. But what I would like to do is read and share with you some of what I was reading. I hope it's not too long, but when I use the term white supremacy, I mean historically based, institutionally perpetuated system of exploitation and oppression of continents, nations, and people of color by white peoples and nations of Europe or the European continent for the purpose of establishing, maintaining, and defending a system of wealth, power, and privilege. White supremacy is the linchpin of imperialism, the system whose injustices of our movements are fighting. Because it's so central, we can't treat white supremacy as just another issue to add to our list of demands if it won't alienate important constituencies. There's no neutrality here. Either we're actively fighting white supremacy or by our silence, we're supporting it. But how can we begin to fight it effectively? One way is to use this period of organizing for the 500 years of resistance to examine the three legacies of U.S. history. So there was a part that I thought that was real interesting. I'll flash forward just a little bit to wrap this up. In the, I think this is at the early 17th century, the colony of Virginia was plagued by rebellions. Africans and Europeans both worked as unpaid contract labor. So we was in the same boat as we are now in our reality, but it was very clear. Our struggle goes back, you know, hundreds of years, but this is why I found it interesting. They united in revolt against their cruel employers. In one famous insurrection, the laborers, who were supposed to defend the colony against the Indians, turned their guns around on their bosses and nearly destroyed the colonial power. So these are, you know, the struggle of the poor people, and all of us are all the same. But we have to be mindful of conscious of where we live and how we're built. Terrified colonists decided to break the back of this unified resistance. They did so by the strategy of the stick and carrot. Europeans who conspired with Africans were dismembered, their terms of servitude extended. Europeans who demanded better treatment, but only for themselves, got a patch of land, their freedom, and a tiny bit of political power. Their masters replaced the contract labor Europeans with enslaved labor of Africans. So they gave other people a little bit to calm them down if they just fought for their own, right? Hey, listen, you know, okay, hey, you know what, we'll give you this, and we'll just replace you with free labor of Africans. We'll make them do it, and this and that. So this sets up a society to where somebody is still in control of everything because they feeding everybody. It's just some might get a little better than others, you know. So that's all I'm gonna read from there. I hate reading and things like that, but I thought there was just, not that I hate reading, I mean, I hate reading when I'm speaking, because I like to look at it as we're just talking, we're just sharing. But that's all I'm doing. I don't claim to be an academic. I despise, that's like a dirty word. I don't claim to be a politician. I don't claim to be any of that. Those are like, nah, I'm just, you know, who I am through my experience, and any way that I could contribute to the cause of us making progress, of us changing society, or us being, we can't really do any of that without being educated, without, you know, not academic education, but that real life, what's going on, how this country was built, what am I really facing type of education. I'll conclude with, one of the things I do, I have some free DVDs there. It's not enough for everybody, so you know, don't try to fight over it. Be cool, you know. No, but they're free DVDs about solitary confinement. They're informative, so you know that's cool. And there's the New Jersey campaign against isolated confinement. That's a bunch of people from the faith-based organizations, from different political angles. Seth is involved, and a lot of great minds are involved about ending solitary confinement in New Jersey. You know, some of you may be aware, just, I'm not a politician, like I said, I ain't gonna get too much, but Senator Lesniak co-sponsored a bill that would have restricted the way that people are treated inside solitary confinement, because it's real torturous, and it would have protected maybe like vulnerable groups like the elderly and the juveniles who are going in there. But Christie vetoed it, but it passed the Assembly, it passed the Senate, it flew past, you know, all of that. So, but if you'd like to learn more about that and be more about CAKE, the campaign against isolated confinement, just you can give me an email afterwards, and I'll make sure you get information on that. All right? Thank you for your time.
Where do you think you're going?
My favorite part.
Yeah.
So I'm supposed to go back?
No, I'm just teasing.
Okay.
We're going to open it up to Q&A, so Justice is going to get back up here.
Really?
For your favorite part.
Hang up? All right. No, this is my favorite part.
And announce your email if you
Get
would
comfy
like to.
up here.
Do you want to put your email out, or
Oh
do you
yeah,
want to?
absolutely.
Yes, how can we get in touch with you, and how can people follow you, and what organization should they look into? And then we'll take some from the audience.
All right, cool. Thank you. Sorry about that. All right, so get this out of. This is not the part I like. I like the question and answer part because people ask questions that they don't even know the depth of what they just asked. But anyways, all right, my name is Justice Rountree on Facebook, right? And my email address is JUSM Rountree, ROUNTREE @gmail.com. I give that out because one of the things that I've done is formed a group of former prisoners who have doing a lot of positive things. Some have nonprofit organizations themselves. Some are just construction workers, union workers. Yes, sir. And they just are doing well. They've successfully re-entered society, which is totally different than some of the view that's projected about that whole criminal justice system. People that have overcame them circumstances. So I brought those guys together. We have a mentoring group called Macro 360, and that's an acronym for mentoring and creating real opportunities. And 360 is just that holistic view. So that's some of what I do. I do spoken word events in Newark. There's one coming up on April 20th. It's just so people could come in, channel their energy, have fun, because these and it has, when we get together with our consciousness and our awareness and our progressive and our positive energy, it's always a beautiful time. So that's what that's about. But please, let's move on to, I saw you, sister. How you doing?
Thank you. I want to say thank you. I appreciate what you say and what you do. And I'd like to invite you to come to Orange, our town, to mainland town. We have a group, University of Orange, who does some building solidarity workshops with, and they're dealing with the issues of prison and reform. And so I'll talk to you about that later.
Absolutely.
Thank you. But I wanted to say something about your narrative. I'm sorry to always be bringing up Native Americans, but I heard in your story that they talk about the Africans and Europeans arming against the Indians. This is the narrative that's been passed down. And unfortunately, a lot of African Americans believe that they did fight against the Indians for the settlers. I just want to point out that they're prisoners of war camps, which are called reservations now. There were always prisoners of war camps. The American Indians or Native Americans were slaves. They were just as much, treated just as badly as, or worse than Africans. And this divide and conquer mentality in terms of getting Europeans and Africans together to fight the Indians. I just wanted to say that is, everybody be aware of that narrative, because that is what they put out. And I have to say that if you've been to South Dakota, where I live, and North Dakota, in those states, you see that the jails and the prisons are filled with Indians, and that they get little, and they're put in jail for anything, and everybody is put in jail. And my child was taken away from me because I lived in a house where people had been convicted.
Absolutely. Come here. No. Let me stop this for a minute. Because the truth of the matter is, come here. Listen, the truth of the matter is, I don't know if I said it incorrectly. It was misinterpreted. I didn't say that at all. At all. No. I said they united to fight against the other Europeans.
Oh.
The colonists.
Well, their narrative is often that.
There is no separation between the Africans and the Indians. They were all one. They were just black people that were dropped off throughout the Caribbean. They call them Indians, but they're not really Indians. It's like they're not. That's not reflective of where they were from. Those was Africans. So no. Sister, please.
No, I thought you read.
I'm just hugging you because I can imagine the pain you went through having listened to some. No, I would never say that.
I thought.
Absolutely
It's a
not.
common narrative, though.
It's a white supremacist narrative.
Yes.
Let's call it what it is. Let's be clear.
Yes.
That's why I was like, and I wanted to just hear you out, but I just was like, I know how painful that must be if you had to tolerate somebody coming up here acting like they know what they're talking about and spewing that. No, so I wanted to hear you out, but I had to come in there and spare your heart.
Thank you.
Please, no, that's an important message. And I apologize if I misspoke it incorrectly. I don't think I did, but if I did, that was definitely an error, which I would never make. I'm clear on the fact because that's not something that's just to gloss over. The struggles on this land, right here, you'll learn more about studying that than you'll learn in any school about what's going on in America. You know, how many people were united. And I pointed it out for that purpose so that we could use that as an example of how Africans and other Europeans united to go against, I'm talking about other Europeans against the colonial oppression, you know what I mean, against the system at that time, the established system. So there's nothing new under the sun. But it was also key in understanding how our social structure is set up on a class level, a race and a class level as well, because those were the origins of that philosophy as well, as far as in this country. So, next, I'm sorry.
That's right. Yeah, you know what they did? They went to Africa because the Native Americans didn't have the antibodies against the diseases. So they came in and they wanted to enslave the Native Americans, but they couldn't because the Native Americans physically were dying off from the European diseases, you know. So when they couldn't enslave the Native Americans, then they went over to Africa. That's what happened.
Some of that was at play. I mean, you know, when you study history, you see that there's, just like today, like this is history right here. And I got you, Brian. But there's so many variables. Forget this room in our society. I mean, forget society in this room. There's so many variables, right? So many things happen at once, you know. But you know, the larger part of something that's a common thread and a connected dot between everything is the establishment of oppression and what it was based on. There's many different ways it was executed. So, Brian, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask a question about the current state of things. So I know
Right.
you and Seth were instrumental in passing the bill. I believe the governor vetoed it
Right.
to not get rid of solitary confinement, but to restrict it a little better, and it wasn't a perfect bill.
Correct.
Can you tell us where we are at with the progress of developing a strategy to get something passed that actually does eliminate it? I mean, is there something pending? Are the bill sponsors re-energizing?
Super great question. That goes to the Cape, so I can get you right in the loop. There's a website. There's there's a newsletter to give out electronically. You'll be updated as to where the movement is in regard to I want to eradicate solitary confinement, but that's not what the bill asked for. So that'll get you right to people. Where it's at right now is the focus is on the next governor. You know, this governor right here has already vetoed it, and Seth is sorry I couldn't make it here yesterday. He's a dear friend of mine. He's great. He's the best. I wish I was here just to support him and honor him yesterday, but I was somewhere else, unfortunately. However, Seth is adamant about making that an issue. He's been, as you mentioned, key in advocacy on that issue. You know, Seth has been outside of New Jersey State Prison, where the management control unit is at. He's always speaks against solitary confinement, always been supportive of me. So, and that's an issue of his. So the goal is to have people that are running make that an issue. You know, so that's what the goal. That's where it's at right now. Focusing this time period on moments to educate, make people aware of what's going on. This will be something that would help, that way. Yeah.
Hi.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, I'm going to ask a question that I want to ask you personally, but I want to ask it in front of everybody so that maybe somebody might benefit as well. What can I do to directly fight the concept of other that we have in this country that's so destructive to everything in society? What can I do other than living myself that way? What can I do to fight that?
Thanks. That's a great question. Thank you. I would have an objective reading of America. Understand the reality of how we got here, and then focus on real change. There's people that's homeless, right? And they were homeless when Obama was the president. They were homeless when Trump's the president. And they'll be homeless when the next president is in office. And that's because politics doesn't reach that level of society. I was the result of, I received way more time, like double digits years of more time than I really should have. But because of some of the political laws that were passed during the Clinton era, the crime bill, things like that, justice was denied for me. And so my point is, get down into the people that are really being affected. And that's what a true analysis of American history, and how we got to where we're at, and it's not necessarily through politics, but politics has been used as a weapon to enforce everything. You see in the second section of the 13th Amendment where it gave Congress, it empowered them to make laws to enforce this philosophy. So you need money to fight that type of power, right? But you could directly affect people now. If you get anything from my story, I've only been out here 10 months, right? So I'm already at the Y, educating and mentoring youth. I'm already facilitating services to other people. I got guys jobs. I didn't forget me having jobs. I've gotten people jobs since I've gotten out. I've been responsible for it. You know what I mean? And I don't take no credit for that. That's just, reaching out and helping somebody in the struggle. We all do that. That's the power of networking. So that's, but you can do stuff like that on a daily basis if I can, right? So, any other questions? I hope that was good for you. All right. Yes.
It's not exactly a question. It's something that I'd like you to keep your eye on in the future. A proposal was just made at the federal government level to take the factories that are attached to the prison industry that are even owned by the federal government and work to enlarge those factories and have those factories start producing for companies. I heard about the project, so I made a push that this educating and providing job skills is great, but they must maintain at least a minimum working wage for these people. So it's something that I'm hoping you get involved in, and as I learn more details, hopefully we can coordinate some kind of push to make sure that we do not continue the slave labor in our business.
Yes, thank you for that. To that point, I would just like to respond to, thank you so much for that point. That's key. And going back to understanding the 13th Amendment, we have the law that supports free labor. So there's like no major corporation that doesn't profit off of slave labor in every way, shape, or form. You've had people trained to do the call operators. When you call somebody and you help them navigate through whatever they're calling for that, they, prisons for that, for making all types of materials. I remember one prison I was at, they would make like chairs like this but smaller for a grade school, and for nothing. That's free labor that they're benefiting from, but it's even bigger than that. And there's nobody that's going to stop it other than us if we just choose to refuse to allow it to happen. But nobody else is going to do anything. So thank you. We get together. Yes. What's up, Nate?
Hey, Justin. I know I can speak for Seth in saying that he's been so happy that there's been such great interaction between us at the campaign and yourself. And you mentioned Seth is adamant about ending solitary confinement, and he's adamant about so many issues of racism and how it is driving mass incarceration. One of those things is restoring voting rights to people in prison and people who have felony records. But one place we're stuck is in the campaign mode right now. How can people who are in prison and who are excluded from the voting process and from the political process, how can we interact with people who are excluded from so many aspects of the political process? How can we help them be involved in the elections?
Right, I understand.
Process?
I understand the question. That question, must start with an analysis of the relationship between politics and prisoners. It's always worked in an adverse capacity. And like I mentioned before, with people that are homeless, people that are in prison, there's a direct correlation between the social conditions and the prison population. And when you don't have a lot of the resources, when you've been disenfranchised, right, systematically, and that's part of just the reality, you don't have a great rapport or relationship or perception of politics. So you must, I guess the purpose of saying that is so that you can understand what your challenge looks like. So it's even difficult for me to suggest a way to get people involved, because it's almost like selling them something that they know and have experienced not to work for them. And that's very hard. That's very difficult. So, I don't support Seth per se in a campaign capacity. You know what I'm saying? I support Seth as a friend, as a great person. And that's how I feel about, several other people in this room, quite frankly, that I've met. Diane. That I just respect them as people. And I see their work on a genuine and on a daily and a regular, basis. That's who they are. So I respect Seth for that. But I also support him in anything he does as well. So I definitely have my Capitol hat and everything. So, but I just don't, the faith in the political system is a tough challenge, I hope that gave you something. Yes, ma'am. Great question. Thank you. In solitary, I also had the unique experience of, I was in solitary confinement because it was 23 years. So there were parts of that time where I was in solitary confinement. And there were parts of those years when I was a paralegal inside. So I got a job, an institutional job as a paralegal to people that had to face disciplinary hearings. Because if you're in there and you violate a law, which is very easy to do, you could just, be lost and violate a law in there. You could not know which way to turn, and sometimes, or just walk too slow. Sometimes you violated one of the way that they apply laws inside these institutions. But you're given a hearing, and you're supposed to have certain rights with the hearing and everything that you never really have. It's an actual kangaroo court, but it's a process. But that's how you get in there into solitary confinement. They have many different sections of solitary confinement. So you might have what they call administrative segregation, which is mostly filled up with people that have somehow been brought through the disciplinary process there. But then you have like voluntary protective custody, where they decide, or well, you might want to become separated, or there's involuntary protective custody, which means that somebody sits in some office inside the institution is deemed that it would be your best interest, or the population's best interest, for you to be in an isolated cell and be subject to a whole bunch of torture conditions. But those are some of the ways that you get in there. And the way that it's applied is no different than any other law. These just are laws on the administrative level, but you have laws on the criminal level, laws on the civil level, and laws seem to be written, from my experience, with like a duality. You can use it to enforce something, you can use it to take something from it, depending on how persuasive you are, how much money you have, you know, how much power, that goes hand in hand, but that you have. So inside prison, that dynamic is, you have no power as a prisoner. And I use that term prisoners intentionally, not inmate, not prisoner is somebody by definition is held against their will. So I always wanted to be, that was part of me being able to get out and not have, you know, hard times that I never actually bought in that I should have been there. I may have made some bad decisions, and I can understand, you know, paying for that, but I understood by who I am, I'm supposed to be better than that, you know. But I was never really taught or exposed to that type of education. Did I answer your question? Yeah, the bill would have, I'm sorry, the bill, yeah, thank you for that part of it. The bill would have, right now, when you have a disciplinary hearing, you could get 1 year for every charge. And usually when they write a charge, they accompany, it's like 3 or 4 writings. So it might be a fight, or what they say was a fight, then it might be a refusal to obey, then it might be a conduct to disrupt charge, but you could get a year on each one of those charges. So you can wind up doing 4 or 5 years over a incident in solitary confinement. Then the conditions of solitary confinement, they don't help people come back out and be better people, right? They just, when you are in an environment that's designed to destroy you, you know, it puts you in a certain mentality, and a lot of people just can't mentally handle it. I've seen people, known people that committed suicide there. I know people that just had mental breakdowns, right? So, and I'm still surprised that I was able to be successful, but I come to terms with the fact that, you know, when you have an idea and a determination, you could do it. So technically anybody could do it. I've seen people in worse situations than what I face overcome their situation. So it just shows me the power of the human spirit. But it was going to stop the elderly from going in there, because there's a large elderly, because they're not letting people out, right? So you have people coming in unjustly, then the parole board isn't letting anybody out. So then you have people that are 70 years old, you know, they're not physically even able to commit crimes anymore, that are serving these long sentences, from the mandatory minimums and extended terms, all these harsh on crime bills that were passed, you know, unilaterally, you know, but being tough on who? Poor people and black people. That's all. It's the only people you're going to see in jail. That's realistic. You ain't going to see it's a slip up if you see somebody in jail that actually had any measure of franchisement in society. Like they had a business, that had, not a small, I'm talking about that was established, like a pillar, you know, every once in a while, you know, somebody would mess up, like a rabbi, get caught, you know, in some scandal or whatever, he would come in, or somebody, but you don't see anybody in there but a whole bunch of poor people. Black people, mostly, because, I mean, I don't understand what the statistics say, but I was on, I can't even count how many tiers I was on from 1993 to 2016, yeah, 10 months. But every tier I went on, it was all black people. Like, damn, like just imagine that feeling. If there was all women and you're somewhere and it's like for 23 years, you just see all women here. That would just be so obvious that something is wrong. You know, so, but because of other measures, you know, a lot of us aren't really, vigilant about issues we become accustomed to sometimes. It's a lot. Yes, sir.
Hey, so I work in 3 different facilities in New Jersey. I want to know about the bill too, because one of the things that I see is that there's no accountability for some of the officers in terms of, like, I've been in the break room and heard officers brag about throwing a kid they didn't like in solitary confinement in AdSeg, just because they looked at him a certain way. So it seems there's no accountability to, like, punish officers or to even look at the reasons for why they're throwing some people into solitary confinement. Is there any, like, do you know if there's going to be anything that's going to address that, or like try to make kind of institutional changes where there's some, there's not this much unchecked power?
Right.
In terms of the
That's great. Where I know you from?
I picked you up.
Yeah. Damn, that's terrible, right? All right, man. Thanks, man. Good to see you. The simple answer is no. Some of these things aren't going to be fixed politically, or they're not political problems. It's hard to describe those conditions where, you have officers who seek to work in these environments. Like, they have personalities that go well with oppression. Like, that's what they love. That's what they like to do. They get a thrill from oppressing people, right? For whatever reasons. But it's perfectly fine with them, and making me suffer makes their day. And nobody is going to stop that, short of having some type of equal measure of either violence or heavy protests. I mean the real meaningful protests where you just refuse to continue to work inside the prisons. Like, people go to prison, like, there's a whole system inside there. It looks like a football field of people going to work inside the prison. Like, stop going. Stop going. But it takes that type of sacrifice because it's that cruel. You can't fight something that's evil with half measures. That's not reality. It has to be equally measured if you want to have an honest conversation about it. And that's why the problem exists, because for whatever reasons, we're not at a state of mentality, a mental state, or physical state, or any other state to combat that on that level. It just, it's not there, unfortunately. So those of us, who strive to do whatever we can do. I work directly with the prisoners in the capacity of the American Friends Service Committee, receiving the letters from prisoners, and we get it out in a publication called From the Inside Out. But that's a way that I strive to educate people, being able to have opportunity to work in an organization like that has been, that has spearheaded movements against. They're the first people that monitor like solitary confinement in this state, because there's an ugly history there. There's a history that, the reason why, like, let me give you the origin since I stopped here, right, about solitary confinement is that New Jersey was like a corridor state during the time when people were involved in progressive movements and black movements, power movements in the 60s and the 70s, when the Black Panthers were formed and other workers' organizations were formed, a lot of progressive movements, and people would go from New York to Philadelphia and travel, and they always had to go down the New Jersey Turnpike. So state troopers would intercept a lot of people, and a lot of people that were in the movements went to prison. And in prison, to keep these politically conscious people away from the general population, they formed these isolated units. So they were made to keep people apart, so that that type of thinking, that type of, because you gotta remember, this is a time when Assata Shakur, she was broke out of Clinton. They physically went and got her out of a New Jersey state prison, and she's still free to this day in Cuba. So, you know, you had the type of people that were willing to give their lives for liberation and freedom. That was realistic at that time. They had to do something about that. And that leads to what we were just speaking about are we at a point where you're ready to deal with your present condition? No, there's a reason why we're not ready to deal with our present, because when people were, they took specific measures to eradicate that in large part. You know, there's the, you know, what is, I don't want to quote somebody, get it wrong, but they say you could jail the revolutionary, but can't jail the revolution. You know, that's, they're trying though. So, any other questions?
Thank you, Justice.
I appreciate it.
We have time for one more if someone has a question, but that would be it.
So, what I'm taking away from this is that somehow we need to organize better to establish prisoners' rights. And what would you think is the road forward there for us? Do you have any input on that?
Right. Well, it's the prisoner right is a major thing. It is because we have the largest prison population in the United States. I'm sorry, on the planet Earth. Right. The United States has like has a quarter of all the people that are incarcerated in the United States. So, and we're not that much of a percentage in the world. I think it's a very low percentage of people globally that we are. So it's extremely disproportionate, and it affects us in all ways but it feeds white supremacy. It's really, I mean, who's making money off of this condition? You know, the same people that's oppressing all of us. All these corporations are invested in prisons. And there's so many different ways, whether it's providing the food, the medical services, clothing, the spray they use, the gas, the vans, you know, and it's so oppressive. So, yet, it's a bigger picture of white supremacy, and wherever you can fight it at, wherever you can become conscious, you know, and teach people, you know, the ways in which to be effective. And there's plenty of work to be done, but it's most important to understand, you know, what you're actually fighting. I hope that answers it. Thank you.